Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas. Their ongoing study in the meaning of God and human experience by W.E. Hocking, published way back in 1912. We're going to take a look at chapters 24 and 25. We now transition into the part 5 of the book, which deals with the worship of God. And you should know up front that for Hocking, worship is a lifestyle. It defines the character of the dialectic. The character of the dialectic is one of a worshipful dialectic. So that dialectic of pugnacity is one of a worshipful attitude. And we're going to take a look at it by looking at the concept of worship and then the concept of mysticism, which is that trying to enter into the unity with God through meditation, and then assigning worth to worship by making it determinate. Let's begin with block 1. Let's take a look at the defining the concept of worship. And Hocking begins by saying that worship is going to be another instinct from the state of mind. Worship is the active approach to God. It's a lifting of our thought to God. It's the intention to enter into a transaction with God. Prayer is the instinct of worship. So there's an instinct, there's a prayer instinct that is sent as a signal to the will, to the intellect. And it's triggered by a motivational base that is religious. Therefore, we have a signal of prayer sent out from state of mind as well, going to the intellect, which receives the signal of dependence and prayer. So we need to look at this, the religious motivational base, in note 2. And Hocking tells us we're governed by the love of God, where love seeks knowledge of God in a way other than reflection. In other words, through the act of prayerful meditation, which is informed of God dialectically. We do have that motivational base which we already possess. So it is informed of God. And that's why Hocking can say in note 3 that worship is reasonable. We use all available knowledge. God is appropriated uniquely to the individual self as a self-consciousness and meditation, as that which enacts the presence of God. We set God within our human will in submission to God within the human will. The act of contrition and submission. That act of receiving that signal of dependence, that signal of prayer. So this act of setting God in the human will, note 4, the self spontaneously diffuses himself to mingle through osmosis through the partition that separates God and self. This is our meditative, prayerful position. But it occurs as a drifting beyond our grasp, but it does have cognitive consequences. It's the other than theoretical relationship to God. It is the meditative, prayerful relationship. It's a transition from he to thou. That act of submission and contrition and meditative prayer. And this defines the thou of worship in note 6. We are aware of two tempers in the self, the one of isolation and the one of fusion. Neither is significant without the other. Distance supplies form, fusion supplies content. Objectivity becomes for the self unifying consent. We consent in a deeply prayerful existential way to a submissive unification with God in the human will. It creates a more centered relationship with the world, and therefore Hocking says that historical worship has two elements: the reflective side, the theoretical side, and the practical side. Theoretically, we kind of begin in the intellect, but we begin with prayerful submission. We've received those signals the signal of prayer and the signal of submission after having already received the signal of awe. And so we do have that theoretical reflective side in the will, but it is a will in submission to the absolute mind of God. But to move into the practical, we have to give the mystical impulse of meditative prayer, we have to give it concrete content. And so block 2 is going to take a look at defining the concept of mysticism. It is a special aspect of worship, but devotion must be properly channeled through art and ceremony. Worship does approximate meditation, becomes a deliberate and intense type of thinking. It's the self removing himself from the realm of appearance. It's removal from the realm of appearance. In note 2, we negate the intrusion of sensation. We critique any ideas that are mere habit. We yield in submission to other mind, seeking true self-knowledge. We yield in submission to the absolute, to other mind. So this note 3, the seeking of true knowledge, mysticism is the art of knowing. It possesses a common metaphysical theory that qualifies that knowing. It posits beforehand the notion of the real as pure unity. It seeks this pure unity of substance, which is approached in worship, in meditative prayerful worship. Christianity negates this tendency of retreating into subjectivity and retreating into the abstract universal. Therefore, Christianity challenges mysticism. Even though it does approximate mysticism in meditative prayer, it does not agree with this retreat into subjectivity, into pure unity. It always seeks to become concrete. So we move into note 4, negating the abstract universal. Because for Christianity, God is incarnate. God dwells among us. God dwells among us for Christianity. Union with God must be a special act of worship that desires to reach wisdom, but Christianity is critical of mysticism's false abstract metaphysics. Mysticism confuses the objective with the subjective. That's the problem. It promotes absorption rather than dialectic. This is where Christianity has to draw a line, because Christianity takes up the dialectic and seeks to become concrete and to realize the kingdom. And so Hocking takes a look in block 2, note 5, the confusing of the objective with the subjective. For mysticism, objects become difficult to grasp. The mystic adheres to a knowledge that is inarticulate. Insight remains unfinished. It needs to become determinate. It is unable to become determinate for the pure mystic. So note 6, mysticism on becoming determinate. Usually mysticism takes recourse in psychology, says Hocking. They posit the one immediate, ineffable. The mystic lacks the concrete powers of expression. They cannot form the predicates of the real, because they don't go out of the self to form the predicates of the real. So let's take a look at note 7, lack of concrete expression. The self cuts itself off from appearance and silences the cataract of idea. There you go. That filter of positing is called, by Hocking, the cataract of idea. It's that lens over the eye. And that's a good term. I like that term. Although cataract usually has a negative connotation, if we think of it as a filter, it makes perfect sense. The sign model of idea that we possess in the realm of positing is the cataract lens of idea in front of the eye. But for mysticism, thinking is mere abstraction. It fails to discern the holistic real because They will not temporarily bracket the real of substance in order to reach concrete expression. They create a whole without predicates, says Hocking. The pure mystic lacks this. For the pure mystic, they create a whole without predicates. So take a look at Block 2, Note 8, the whole as unity and the need for predicates. The mystic is non-committal to the cognitive importance. The signs of meaning still need to be read within the concrete real of cause and effect. The thread of meaning is lost. Mysticism is therefore defined by its deed of worship, which he has done throughout Block 2 here. But its greatest weakness is that it does not move on to realize the subjective real in a concrete way through external concrete existence. That becomes the failure of a pure mysticism, and that's why Christianity challenges it, because for Christianity, Hocking says, idea must become concrete. State of mind sends signals to the realm of positing, and it empowers us to make and to participate in a praxis of making the kingdom concrete, in realizing the actuality of kingdom. And so he wants to take a look at how this takes place in Block 3, and he calls that the worth of worship, bringing worship to a point of becoming existentially worthwhile and objectively worthwhile. Not just subjectively worthwhile, but in a holistic way. And that means getting involved in that dialectic of pugnacity. So let's take a look at Block 3. Hocking tells us that the instinct of prayer empowers our sense of ontological importance. In other words, in the realm of the intellect and the will, we begin with that recognition of the ontological importance of the notions of the true. We couple that with a trace impulse of our love of God. Every self is to reach self-conscious understanding, says Hocking, and it means finding our place within the Absolute, where we become fully known within that dialectic with the Absolute. So the goal is to reach full self-knowledge. In Note 2, we seek the measure of our idea, which becomes our ruling passion, empowered by the mystic impulse of prayerful meditation, but that can take various forms, says Hocking. We seek the ontological origin for those thoughts of the will. We seek the real. We seek the real for the notions of the true. We seek to posit them as idea. So giving form to the mystic impulse in Note 3, we do this in order to reach self-knowledge in God's presence through the medium of worship. We surrender the soul as subordinate to the universe. This subordination brings revelation. It brings revelatory truth. But it is beyond concept, so that signification is difficult to put into words. And so he talks about this giving articulation to mystic impulse in Note 4. We labor with the burden of meaning. We are under the obligation to propagate the true. Universal truth is revealed through worship. The worth of novelty emerges out of our worshipful dialectic. Out of worship emerges perpetual amendment of truth, those discoveries of the true and the return moment. And that's why we conclude with Block 3, Note 5, perpetual amendment and return moment. Of worship comes the external criticism of all habit and an openness to novelty. There's a hunger for the radically new. Dialectical worship prepares the soul for novelty. Worship is a spontaneous impulse for ultimate judgment of life in that realm of objectivity where we measure idea. Judgment and measure takes place in the realm of objectivity as we work through our posited notion of idea dialectically in praxis ministry, in action, and euangelizo proclamation. And so Hocking tells us that worship is a preparation of the soul for this novelty. In that realm of positing, we have that signal of reverence that we receive, and coupled with the signal of prayer and dependence in the intellect, coupled with reverence, we do take up an attitude of being prepared for discovery of the new of the kingdom within external reality in the midst of praxis. We get involved in measuring our idea through praxis ministry, and we also enter into this ongoing judgment of life, of looking beyond surface appearance for the real behind it. Spiritual perception leads us to this recognition. We discover the novelty of emerging new truth, and that creates return moment, where we internalize the discovery of the new in the midst of ministry and enter back into state of mind and revise our motivational base and state of mind, which will in turn revise the signals that go out to centered self and to intellect and to realm of positing. Therefore, we have the next time through dialectic, we have a more mature work of sorting in the realm of intellect. We have a more mature organization of signs into system in the realm of positing, and we have a more mature ministry of praxis next time through dialectic. And it continues that way as we continue to have additional discoveries in ministry, and return moments continue, and state of mind continues to be matured and further imprinted by Christ, and that maturity again fuels and empowers emotively the next cycle of the dialectic. So we get great teaching here on the concept of worship, the concept of mysticism, and the worth of worship in chapters 24 and 25. That's pages 341 to 369. We'll pick up next time in chapter 26.